Welcome, dear listener. You've arrived, not at a destination, but at a moment of stillness, a soft pause in the rhythm of your day, or the quiet threshold of your night. Let your shoulders relax, let your eyes grow heavy. There's no need to do anything now. But listen, tonight we'll take a slow, unhurried journey to a place that no longer exists, yet lingers in the corners of old maps and worn manuscripts. A place that breathed, and baked, and brewed, and smelled unmistakably like soup. And Scribes, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely appreciate what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you are tuning from and what time it is for you. It is always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. This is Paris, but not the Paris of wide boulevards and flashing lights. Not the Eiffel Tower or the cafes along the Seine dot. No, this is the Paris of the 13th century. The Paris of steep cobbled lanes, wooden shutters, smoke spirals rising from cook fires, wax dripping onto parchment, and woolen robes brushing against. A city without glass windows, but full of glass eyesmen and women staring into the quiet fire of knowledge, chasing learning by candlelight and more than anything else. This is a city of sounds and smells. You may be surprised, but it didn't always smell bad. Yes, it smelled of waste, of animals, of sweat, but also of cabbage stew thickened with barley, of tallow and beeswax, of fresh inked pages hanging. In university stalls, of fennel boiling on hearths, of warm bread from street vendors outside the chancery gates. And among these odors were people, living ordinary days with quiet dignity despite the limits of their time. There were clerks and copyists, parchment makers, and law students, none famous, none rich, but all vital to the beating heart of a city before printing, before novels, before newspapers. For the next 2 hours, we will walk beside them, first through the winding morning streets of a law clerk's daily route from rented lodgings to the Latin Quarter, under cathedral towers and past shouting fishmongers. Then into the dim scriptoria of the university where rented books passed hand to hand and scribes bent over tables for hours at a time, chasing perfection in ink. After that, we'll open the city's hidden documents, census rolls, guild lists, and the occasional note from the coroner to glimpse the lives of those forgotten by monuments, those whose stories come not in stone but in soft ink smudges. And finally we'll pass through a gate, just a few minutes walk, but a world apart from a poor clerk's alley to the polished halls of the royal court at the Louvre. Not all history is war or royalty. Sometimes it is soup, sometimes it is scribes, and always it is human dot. So now, take a deep breath. The streets are still quiet, the lamps glow gently, and Paris waits. Let us begin with one man's morning walk. Imagine the faint blue hush. Of pre-dawn the sun has not yet risen, but the city of Paris is already waking. Somewhere to the east, over the flat farmlands beyond the walls, a soft lavender light glows against the low-hanging mist. The city is cold, the kind of chill that curls under doorways and rests in the folds of woolen tunics. You're a young man, or perhaps not so young. You are not noble, not yet important, but you are literate. You have studied the liberal arts and now studied law. Not canon, not theology civil law, written in long paragraphs and Latin maxims, debated fiercely in damp. Lecture halls. You rent a small room on the Rue de la Parc Minori, near the parchment sellers. The ceiling is low, the bed frame is rough. Your fingers are still stained from ink. It's morning, and it's time to walk. Imagine the sound of a wooden shutter creaking open. Slowly, a thin shaft of pale light slips across the uneven wooden floor. It's cold, the kind of cold that sits in the gaps between floorboards and lingers just above the stone threshold. You pull your cloak tighter, not out of drama, but from habit. The wool is rough, but serviceable. It smells faintly of smoke and dry parchment. You wore it yesterday. You will wear it again tomorrow. Your room, if it can be called that, is part of a subletter, subdivided upper floor of a merchant's house on Rue de la Parc-Minori, Parchment Street. The name is not poetic, it is literal. The air here smells faintly of animal skins, lye and chalk, from the parchment makers who scrape and stretch skins in the open courtyards nearby. The mattress is filled with straw, not fresh, but not yet mouldy. There's a basin of water near the door, glazed with ice. You touch it just briefly. It's clean from the pump to streets over. You splash your face, not briskly, not dramatically, just enough to signal that morning has begun. Your daily rhythm is not urgent. You don't rush. You move like everyone does, slowly preserving warmth and energy. Today, you must attend a reading of Justinian's Digest, followed by commentary. The professor is older, prefers silence to questions, and sometimes mumbles over the passages. But his authority is respected, if not admired. You wrap a scarf over your tunic. It is plain, undyed wool. Not soft, not scratchy, familiar. You tuck a worn leather-bound notebook into your satchel. The binding is loosening. You'll mend it later with glue or twine. The ink you carry is frozen. You chew the tip of your pen just slightly. A habit. Then you descend the wooden stairs, each one groaning under your weight. Outside, the city exhales. The Rue de la Parc-Minori is narrow. You could almost touch both sides with outstretched arms. The buildings lean in as though whispering to one another. Above, lines of laundry hang frozen in place, starched stiff by night air. You walk slowly, adjusting to the world. To your left, the atelier of a parchment worker. The door is open a crack, revealing a workbench slick with water and the white gleam of scraped calfskin. A boy no older than 10 is dragging a bundle of hides from the back. His fingers are red. He does not look at you. The smell here is distinctive, not repulsive, just earthy, sour, like chalk, leather, and something faintly animal. You continue. The cobbles are wet, not from rain, from wastewater tossed during the night. You step around a puddle without thought. It's second nature now. The city is full of puddles, some cleaner than others. A dog noses through a basket beside a shuttered bakery. The scent of yeast is faint, warming with the rising sun. You wonder if they'll sell yesterday's loaves for half price at midday. A woman calls softly to her daughter from a second-story window. The girl, still in a linen shift, runs out with a bucket toward the communal pump. Her feet are bare. You hear her toes slap against the cobblestones. There are no horses here yet, only handcarts and tired Men.u reach a bend in the road, and the city opens slightly just enough to glimpse the pale towers of Notre Dame beyond the rooftops. Their tops are lost in mist. Bells do not ring yet. It is too early. You walk on. Now you turn southward onto Rue Saint-Jacques, the main artery of medieval Paris, wider, louder, busier even at this hour. Vendors are setting up already bread, salt, honey cakes. A woman with a baby strapped to her chest arranges onions on a cloth near the wall of a church. She does not smile, but her motions are gentle. A boy with a bent flute plays a few uncertain notes nearby, hoping for coins. A beggar with one eye raises his hand silently. You nod. You have no coin to give, but you do not look away. This street leads to the Latin Quarter, the scholarly district, not because it is especially Roman, but because here, in its cloisters and lecture halls, Latin is still spoken not conversationally, but formally, in disputations, in treatises, in letters, sent to bishops and foreign courts. The scholars dress no better than the peasants, but they walk differently. Heads down, lips moving silently, as if reciting. You recognize one, a student of theology. His robe is patched, his boots wrapped with linen. He carries a candle stub in one hand. His ink-stained fingers tremble slightly. As he crosses himself while passing a shrine, the light is stronger now. The sun has crested the horizon. You smell smoke, wet wool, lentils, fish, ink. Paris is fully awake. And you are nearly there. The buildings here are older. Some of them lean against one another, held upright by wooden beams and sheer stubbornness. The stones beneath your feet change from random cobble to something more deliberate, wider paving, laid flat, often uneven from the weight of centuries. Here the air smells of wax and sweat. Students stand huddled around a stall selling cheap parchment. A master in dark robes reads from a book aloud, his audience half listening as they warm their hands near a brazier. You pause briefly by a public notice board, messages pinned with wax blobs, lost spectacles, reward of 2 deniers, seeking lodging near Rue des Anglais, copyist wanted for 12 pages of Boethius. You feel your stomach grumble. You had no breakfast. Perhaps you'll buy a bowl of soup at midday, lentil or cabbage. Maybe both. You pass the Collège de Sorbonne, its courtyard still quiet. Inside, a janitor sweeps. His broom scratches gently against the stone. You know you'll spend most of your day in a room nearby, listening to commentary on Roman law. You will write, you will blink in the cold. You may fall asleep once, quietly, and afterward. Perhaps you'll visit the baths, or help a friend prepare a manuscript. But for now, you breathe, you are here. You have arrived, and so begins the day. The sun has risen fully now, though it casts only a dull glow through the grey winter haze. It does not pierce the alleys, nor reflect on marble. There is little marble here. The buildings are wood, plaster, stone reused from Roman ruins and older walls. Some tilt, some lean, and nearly all are marked with soot. The morning lectures are over. Your hand aches slightly from writing. The wax tablet in your satchel bears the shallow marks of yesterday's notes, slowly being erased by time and handling. You carry your leather-bound copy of glossed civil law prized, possession wrapped in cloth to protect it from damp air. Your mind is full. but not overwhelmed. The rhythm of the day continues, measured, slow dot, and now it is time to eat. You turn toward Jus de la Harpe, where a small stall serves lentil soup near the corner of a printless shopfront. The cooker-woman with thick arms and a soot-stained apron stands over a large cauldron suspended by an iron tripod. The scent is immediate, warm, earthy, comforting. You hand over 2 small coins. She nods silently and dips a wooden ladle into the pot. The soup is thick, mostly lentils, with small bits of onion, parsley, and stale bread softened by broth. It steams faintly in the cold air. You hold the wooden bowl in your hands and step back toward the wall. Others do the same. Students, clerks, even a soldier off duty. No one speaks much. The soup is not remarkable, but it is warm and it is consistent. A man beside you mutters a line from Aristotle. You recognize the passage, but do not respond. He smiles faintly, not expecting anything more. A dog sits nearby, waiting, not begging, just watching. Its fur is matted, its eyes gentle. You finish the soup slowly. Each bite carries the rhythm of the day. You do not rush. You scrape the last softened crumbs of bread with your spoon. Then you return the bowl. She rinses it quickly in a pot of warm water and nods to the next customer. You feel full, not satisfied, but steady. You wipe your hands against your cloak and walk on. You walk further east now, toward a narrow alley where the parchment walls darken with age and soot. Here, beneath a makeshift awning, is the book renter. He is older than most, thin fingers, eyes that blink slowly. He wears a cap that covers his thinning hair, and a coat too fine to be new. Laid out before him on a long wooden shelf are bundles of parchment tied with twine, rough leather bindings, and stitched folios. Many are glosses of law or theology. Some are copies of Aristotle's Ethics. A few are grammar books in Latin and Greek. You nod politely. He recognizes you. You've rented from him before. He speaks quietly. His voice is papery. One denier. For 2 nights, the Boethius is already gone. I have a digest, half glossed, and a Cicero if you read fast. You choose the glossed digest, not because it's new, but because your professor favors it. You hand over your name spoken aloud, written nowhere, and he records it in a small ledger. The book smells faintly of ink and mildew, but it is intact. You slip it carefully into your satchel and thank him with a nod. The transaction is mundane, but it is important. This is how knowledge flows, not in grand libraries or towers, but one hand to another over wooden stalls and whispered Latin. You walk away. A student stops behind you to haggle over a page of SALLUST. The building where your afternoon lectures are held is unimpressive. A simple wooden door, slightly warped. The floor inside is uneven, and the benches creak under weight. But the warmth is real. A brazier burns gently in the corner, tended by a boy no older than 12. The heat is welcome, even if it is faint. You take your place. The professor enters without announcement. He wears a long robe of dark wool, trimmed slightly. With fur at the collar, his beard is thin. His voice is slow. He begins the commentary without preamble, quoting from Corpus Juris Civilis, then passing the sentence. Word by word, he speaks in Latin. You translate silently into your own understanding. the words float. Some land, some pass by. You do not struggle to stay awake, but your mind drifts. Outside, the small window, a bird lands on the ledge. It hops, looks inward, then flies away. You hear the scratch of pens, the occasional cough, the shift of weight as someone leans forward. The lecture continues. Not urgent, not dramatic, just steady, like. The city itself, the sun begins to lower. The light through the narrow window turns gold, then grey. You stretch your fingers, sore from writing. The professor concludes with a short prayer, more habit than devotion. You gather your things and rise. Outside. The streets are busier. Children run past with sticks, shouting in a game you don't know. A man carries a basket of turnips. Another rolls a wheelbarrow of dried peat for heating. A woman pulls her cloak tightly as she passes to students arguing over a philosophical point, their voices rising briefly before falling again into silence. The scent of soup returns, this time barley. You pass a bakery, its windows fogged from the heat within, loaves of brown bread cool on wooden trays. You consider buying one, but your coin is low. Instead, you walk, not with purpose, but with rhythm. The city is not beautiful in the way stories describe, but it is alive. Each alley smells of something different. Tallow, iron, rotting leaves, wine, garlic, damp wool, and among all this, it smells faintly, always. Of parchment, you return to Rue de la Parcaminerie as the sky darkens. The shadows stretch longer. Lamps are being lit by hand-small oil flames in glass cups hooked against doorways. You nod to the parchment maker. He is still working. The boy is asleep in a pile of rags beside the fire. A cat curls on a bench nearby. Your room is unchanged. The basin is no longer iced, but still cold. You remove your cloak. Your fingers ache. You light your lamp. The oil sputters, then catches. The glow is dim, but enough. You open your rented digest. You begin to read. There is no music, no warmth, only the soft rustle of parchment, the whisper of your own voice repeating Latin phrases. The day winds down, quietly, without celebration, without climax. The rhythm of your life continues. Day after day, soup, parchment, law, wool, cold, ink. It is not dramatic, but it is steady, and it is yours. Imagine the late morning light filtering through a narrow window. It doesn't flood the room. It lingers in patches, catching the dust motes that swirl in slow spirals above a long wooden desk. This is not a library, not a shop. It is a scriptorium, one of many in Paris, modest in size, but vital to the city's rhythms. The desk is worn smooth by generations of hands. Ink stains blot its corners. A strip of wax hangs from a bronze holder. Beside it, a flame burns quietly, more smoke than light. At this desk sits a man. His name is not remembered. His handwriting is . He is a scribe, a university copyist. He will spend today as he spent yesterday, as he will spend tomorrow. In silence, hunched over parchment, with a quill in hand, before the scribe begins. He must prepare a piece of goose feather, carefully stripped of barbs, hardened by heat and trimmed with a small blade, becomes a quill. He tests the tip by dragging it lightly over a scrap of parchment. It scratches faintly. Too thin, he adjusts. Trims again. Better. He dips the tip into iron gall ink, made from oak galls wine, and a hint of iron salt. The ink is dark, slightly acidic and permanent. It smells faintly of vinegar and age. The parchment prepared animal skins already stretched on the board. It is slightly uneven. A thin hairline runs through one corner. The texture is dry, with tiny ridges that catch the quill if he moves too fast. He draws light lines with a lead point. Guidelines, margins. He does not speak, he does not hum, he breathes. He writes, the sound is constant, a faint scratch, a soft pause, another scratch. Sometimes he lifts the pen, shakes his hand, flexes his fingers, and then resumes. This is the rhythm of the scribes. Paris in the 13th century is full of students. Thousands attend lectures on theology, law, philosophy, and grammar, but books are expensive. Too expensive for most so. A new system emerges called the Petches system. Books are divided into standard sections called petchia or pieces. These are lent, one at a time, to students or scribes, who then copy the section by hand. When one section is finished, the next is borrowed. A full book, especially something long like Gratian's Decretum or the sentences of Peter Lombard, might take weeks to copy. Section by section, the university stationers oversee this system. They are registered with the university and approved to rent official texts. They maintain master copies, often chained to their stalls. The scribes, whether students or professionals, come daily to collect the next petchia. This is how knowledge spreads not through printing, but through repetition. A slow, steady, human printing press. Powered by fatigue and purpose, the scribe works most of the day by natural light. But in winter or on overcast days, the oil lamp is his only companion. Its flame flickers with every draught. The light is warm but unsteady. He adjusts the wick. Often too much oil, and it smokes. Too little, and it gutters out. He keeps his inkpot capped when not in use. The parchment must remain clean. If a blot falls, he scrapes it carefully with a knife, then buffs it smooth with a pumice stone. The work is meticulous. He copies not just letters, but layout replicating glosses, commentaries, marginalia, even decorated capitals, if required. Most manuscripts are plain. Few have illumination, but even a simple decorative letter outlined in red or blue brings beauty to the text. When the page is complete, he places a small weight to keep the parchment from curling. He does not smile, but he feels something close to peace. Not all scribes are men. In quiet back rooms. Behind family shops and hidden convent walls, women copy texts as well. Daughters of bookbinders, sisters of parchment makers, nuns in enclosed orders. Their names rarely appear. Their work rarely credited, but their hands are present in margins, in clean lines, in the subtle consistency of script. Some prepare rubrics, the red-letter headings that organize texts. Others copy prayers or school texts. One woman, known only as the sister of Jean La Calligraphy, was said to have copied over 20 missals for churches along the Seine. Her handwriting, neat and compressed, appears in records, but not in signatures. She worked by habit, quietly, faithfully, a rhythm. Of her own once copied, the parchment sheets gold folios must be ordered. Stacked and bound, The binder's work is physical. He sews the choir's gathered sets of folios using linen thread, stitching them through holes made with a bone awl. Covers are made from wood, wrapped in leather, often reused, sometimes reinforced with iron corners or clasps. The spine is not flexible. The book does not lie flat, but it is durable and heavy. Once bound, the manuscript is shelved, lent, or stored. Some are chained to desks in reading rooms, others are hidden in chests, protected from mice and damp. The binder adds a final mark, a name, a date, a quiet flourish of pride. The work is done until the next one. The scribe leans forward. Again his fingers are stiff, and his wrist aches slightly from the long afternoon of copying. He has nearly finished a full folio of legal commentary, dense lines in even columns, text interspersed with gloss, and then a slip, a missed line. He notices immediately, not with panic, but with a small exhale, barely more than a sigh. There is no backspace, no undo dot. Instead, he lifts his pen and places a tiny mark in the margin of a hand, drawn with 2 fingers extended, pointing to the place where the missing sentence will be inserted later. He will write it below in smaller script. A common practice, nothing to be ashamed of. The readers will understand. These marginalian notes, corrections, sometimes even tiny drawings, are as much a part of medieval books as the main text. In some volumes, scribes add quiet jokes to the margins, not crude, not loud, but dry observations. Small complaints about cold fingers or poor ink. One manuscript bears a line in Latin that translates to, "The parchment is hairy. I blame the sheep." Another contains a complaint. "The light fades. My ink freezes. I write in darkness." And in the margins of a particularly difficult theological tract, a weary scribe once scrawled, "Lord, let this be the last page." No one erased it. It is still there. A quiet human moment, surviving for centuries. You may never have smelled a medieval book. It is not like modern paper. It is richer, heavier. Each book carries the scent of animal skin, aged ink, candle smoke, old leather, and the faintest trace of human oil from centuries of hands. Books were touched, pressed, prayed over, cried upon. Some contain fingerprints, faint but visible where a tired student leaned too heavily while reading. Others bear grease stains, where someone ate too close to the page. In many volumes, you will find names, not always grand ones. A boy signing his first alphabet, a woman marking her ownership, a monk copying a line of psalm, then quietly writing his name below in smaller letters. These books are not just vessels of text, they are repositories of presence. A letter smudged where someone sneezed, a note inserted in the margin to clarify, a confusing line, a pen trilink tested in a corner before real work began. Each book is a record, not just of content, but of process. You can feel it, still. The work of copying texts was considered holy, not always because the texts were religious, but because the act itself demanded discipline. Attention, humility. In some monastic scriptoria, scribes began their work with prayer, a simple invocation. May this writing be clean, and my heart be patient. Even in secular shops, there was a quiet reverence. Silence was preferred. Voices were hushed, but not all scribes were solemn. In the colder months, some worked with gloves, fingers cut free. Others sat on cushions or furs, exchanging warm stones to keep their feet from freezing. They worked until the light failed. Then they gathered candles or closed their tools. At night, their hands cramped, their eyes blurred. They rubbed their temples with lavender oil or rinsed their eyes with rose water, believed to relieve strain. Then they rested, not always on beds, sometimes on straw, sometimes wrapped in cloaks beside the fire. They dreamed of letters, shapes, lines that repeated in their minds, and in the morning they began again. Most of what Scribes copied has not survived: fires, floods, insects, wars. Pages were reused, scraped, torn, lost, but some remained. A few hundred texts from medieval Paris survive in libraries today. Many bear the marks of Parisian hands, the structure of Petia copying, the gloss systems developed in the Latin Quarter, the binding style of a specific workshop. Scholars can recognize them by scent, by texture, by line spacing, but more than that, by presence. There is a rhythm to Parisian manuscripts, a tempo, a spacing between lines, a tendency toward clarity over ornament, a focus on argument, logic, comment, counter-comment. It was a city of learning, not just reading, but engaging, and behind every page was a person, someone with ink-stained hands and tired eyes, someone who never imagined a future reader. And yet, here you are, to walk through the Latin Quarter of Paris. In the 13th century was to walk through a city of books without bookstores. There were no shelves lined with volumes for sale, no glass windows with bindings on display. Instead, books were handled through negotiation, through trust, through systems of rental, copying, and scholarly networks. The University of Paris, growing rapidly in this period, was not a campus, but a constellation buildings scattered across the left bank, where theology, canon law, philosophy, and grammar were taught. Its power rested not on land or towers, but on parchment and books. Were central to its gravity the masters teachers appointed with the universities authoritioned, official copies of required texts, many marked with annotations. These master copies were carefully guarded, rarely lent in full, often chained. From these copies came the Petia, standardized text fragments for copying. Dozens of students might be copying the same book simultaneously, a part of a broader ecosystem of reproduction. Students took notes during lectures, then rented a Petia to verify or expand upon what they'd heard. Scribes, in turn, were paid to produce cleaner, more readable versions for sale or future loan. Books moved, always moved. One might be rented, copied, then lent to a friend in another faculty, then bound, then donated to a church, then stolen, then recovered, then recopied again. Each book bore the traces of its life. Some carried ex libris marks from the library of Brother Raymond. Others had rental marks to be returned by St. Michael's Day. A few bore fines scrawled hastily in the back, 5 sous owed for delay, paid in full, witnessed. This was living literature, not frozen, not pristine. A book was not a possession, it was a process, a relationship, a presence, passed hand to hand. You might rent a copy of Ethics that still bore the indentation of a prior student's elbow. You might read a gloss that quotes a line your own professor spoke aloud just days before. You might hold a text that will outlive you by centuries, though its scribe was younger than you are now, in Paris. Books were not monuments, they were motion. The scriptorium is dim now, lit by 3 flickering lamps and the last grey glow of the sky through a narrow window. The scribe closes his inkwell. The last few strokes on the folio are drying. The parchment curls ever so slightly at the corners. He stands, not abruptly, slowly, with the weight of a full day behind his shoulders. He stretches not with a yawn, but a simple, practiced movement. He rotates one wrist, then the other, his eyes close for a moment. The work is not done, but it is paused. He gathers his tools with care, the knife, the bone folder, the quills, the scraps. He blows gently on the drying ink. He places the weight atop the last folio. There is no applause, no audience. Only stillness. Outside, the air smells faintly of cooling stone and charred wood. Someone nearby is roasting turnips. The scent is thick and earthy. The scribe locks the door behind him, not with a key, but a latch and a heavy stone pressed against it. He walks slowly. His boots scuff the stone street. Not hurried, not delayed, just present. He passes other students, other scribes, a woman holding a candle. Inside a window, a man carrying water up 3 stairs, a cat, tail curled high, prowling along a garden wall. He turns back toward his small lodging, where a bed awaits, straw-filled, covered in a woolen blanket, patched twice. He does not light the lamp right away. He sits first, removes his boots, rolls his shoulders, and breathes. His fingers still tingle with memory, with letters, with ink. Tomorrow will bring more pages, more lines, more margins, more small complaints written in the corners of great texts. But for now, it is enough. He rests. Imagine a room filled not with people, but with paper. Not modern paper, of course, but parchment, vellum, wax tablets, stitched scrolls, shouldering the faded names of lives once lived. Some are barely legible now, others are surprisingly crisp, preserved by luck more than design. Paris in the 13th and 14th centuries was full of record keepers, quiet clerks hunched over tables in city halls, church offices, guild chambers, and coroners' lofts. Their task was not storytelling, but documentation. They wrote not to be remembered, but so others could not forget. These documents were mundane contracts, censuses, death reports, tax lists, building disputes, bread prices, and yet, together, they whisper. They whisper of who lived where, what they did, what they owned, how they died. They are, in their soft and smudged ink, the soul of a city. Let us begin where most stories don't, with a list. In the year 1292, a city clerk was tasked with something simple, cataloguing the professions of Paris. He did not know he was creating one of the most detailed occupational records of medieval Europe. What resulted was a list ordered not by wealth or fame, but by trade. There were 320 bakers spread across different parishes, 29 parchment makers, mostly near the university, 16 chandlers, selling candles made of tallow or beeswax, 0.9 copyists, officially licensed, 2 surgeons, 1 person, listed simply as clarifier of wine. The list includes both men and women. It lists widows who ran laundries, young apprentices, and blind men who offered prayers at funerals. It lists people by location, often using reference points like ... next to the well at Saint Germain ... opposite. The fig seller ... below the shop of the salt vendor. These were not street addresses. Paris had no house numbers, no postal codes, but it had memory, it had rhythm. The list followed those rhythms, and in reading it today, we do too now. Let us move gently to a darker record. The coroner's roll on Paris, like most medieval cities. Death was both common and officially noted, especially when sudden, accidental, or suspicious. The language is sparse, emotionless, but behind each note is a life and a loss. Let us read a few entries. On the 18th day of March, near the church of Saint Marcel, one Guillaume, a mason, did fall from a scaffold. His death was immediate. In the Rue des Lombards, a child of 6 summers, name not known, was struck by a horse cart. Witnesses say she ran after a ball at the bathhouse. Near Saint-Choc, an apprentice fainted in the steam, found lifeless by the door, body taken to the guild. No drama, no commentary, just quiet facts. And yet, in these entries, we find not just tragedy, but texture. We learn the streets where children played, the tools that failed, the dangers of daily life. We feel the weight of silence behind these records. The mother not named, the neighbor who gave testimony, the clerk who held the pen with steady hand, and we begin to understand. A city is not built only of stones, it is built of memories. Some written, some lost. In 1313, a partial census was taken in Paris, not by the king, but by a bishop. He sought to know how many souls lived in each parish. The language used was careful. So many souls in the care of this church, so many children, so many without means. Some parishes like St. Paul recorded over 2,000 people. Others, like St. Landry, had fewer than 400. The census did not ask for professions or taxes. It asked how many shared a household, how many received alms, how many lived alone. And so we learn, a woman named Odette lived alone with a goose. A man named Colin took in 3 orphans. A boy named Aubin was recorded as mute but gentle. These names are not famous, but they are real, and through ink and time they now drift toward you. In the quiet of your own room, imagine their breath, their footsteps, their street corner. For a moment, they are here again, the heart of medieval. Life was not a palace or university. It was the parish. Each person in Paris belonged to one. Each parish served as not only a place of worship, but as a keeper of life's most essential records, not just grand events, but quiet ones. The baptismal registers noted the arrival of new souls, not always with full names, sometimes only with a single name and the phrase Infant of Marie, Spinster, Godmother, Isabeau. Some entries are joyful. Twins born to the tanner's wife after long labor, baptized together. Others are sparse, even haunting. Child born in frost, baptized in haste, died same day, buried beside wall. There are marriage records, 2 contracts drawn in tidy Latin, often overseen by a priest, occasionally by a city clerk. These were practical arrangements. A baker's daughter joined with a candlemaker's apprentice. A widow, age 43, remarried a mason for shared lodging. A travelling student wed the innkeeper's niece, with 2 jugs of wine given as dowry. Then there are departures. Death was recorded not for its tragedy, but for the rhythm it marked in the parish. The wording was gentle, passed quietly in the night, laid to rest after a week's illness, departed while in prayer. Sometimes entire lines were devoted to plague deaths, all 8 of this household in the space of 10 days. Buried in the common trench, no names, just acknowledgement. The parish priest closed the register for the day with a cross and a prayer, and the city moved on. But those names remain, centuries later, pressed into parchment like footprints on wet clay. Paris did not burn in one great fire. It burned in small ones, often quietly, a lantern overturned, a spark from a brazier, a tallow candle too close to dry rushes. The city's buildings, made of wood and plaster, were tinder, and when flames caught, records were kept. The fire lists held in the Hotel de Ville recorded each blaze, the damage, and the assessed cost of repair. Fire on Rue du Temple, 2 homes damaged, 1 chimney collapsed, no loss of life. Roof, blaze at the Chandler's Guildhall, wax melted, roof to be replaced by spring. Sometimes a name appears. Jacques the porter lost all. Given shelter by Saint Mary, these were not just lists of disaster, they were proof of resilience. Alongside each entry was a note of rebuilding. Timber purchased from Saint Germain, work. To resume after thaw, stone donated by Mason's brother-in-law, a city that burned, rebuilt quietly, brick by brick, ledger by ledger, and always some tired clerk wrote it down. Paris taxed its people not in sweeping edicts, but in small, measured bites. The taille was the most common tax levy placed on the household, based on income, trade, and location, but the real story is not in the tax itself. It is in the exceptions. Certain groups paid nothing. Clergy, protected by the church, scholars, often exempt by university charter, widows, for the first year of mourning, and then there were those who petitioned for relief. Jean Washerwoman, husband dead, income uncertain, requesting partial remission. Henry Leboiteau, injured leg, unable to work, bread provided by neighbor. These requests were not always granted, but they were read, noted, recorded. Sometimes, in the margins, a clerk wrote simply, deferred, or reassess in spring. These margins are where the humanity lives. The tax records do not scream, they do not accuse, they observe who owed, who tried, who failed, who asked. A city seen in columns of names and numbers, each row a life. In motion, even in the 13th century, people complained to the guild, to the parish priest, to the provost. These letters were formal, but the frustration still slips through the neat script and humble phrasing. Here is one from a baker on Rue Saint-Martin, to the master of the guild. The fishmonger's store blocks the oven vent. My bread bakes unevenly. I ask humbly for its removal. Another from a widow near the Seine, to whom it may concern. A foul smell rises from the drains behind our alley. My children cough. I begged that it be seen to before summer. A third, unsigned, written in a more hurried hand. The neighbor pours slop from the upper window. Twice it has struck my head. I am patient, but the Lord sees all. These letters rarely led to great action, but they were read. Catalogued, many bear small replies in red ink. Noted, speak with the guild, sent a warning. This was not bureaucracy as we know it. It was conversation in inkslow, deliberate, eternal. The vocabulary of frustration was wrapped in formality, but it remained recognizable. They were tired, they were cold, they wanted fairness, and they believed that writing it down meant something. Not every name is recorded, even in the most meticulous ledgers. Some entries are vague, incomplete, or entirely absent. Wife of Thomas, no other. Name, boy, age, unknown. Found near St. Laurent, servant of the weaver, died in summer. These are not erasures. They are silences. Some names were never spoken. Others were forgotten before the ink dried. Some people passed through the city like shadows sleeping in stables, selling herbs from baskets, trading labor for soup. They lived, they felt, they tried, but the ledger had no line for lonely, no box for almost, and so many vanish. But even in that vanishing, we catch a glimpse. The anonymous entries are perhaps the most human of all. They remind us that Paris was not just a city of guilds and taxes, but of people between definitions. A girl selling cress by the bridge, a man who carved combs and prayed beneath an overhang, a child who followed their mother into the dye house, and never left again. Their names are gone, but not their presence. The clerks of Paris were trained to be careful. Their lines were straight, their ink dried flat, but they, too, were human. Sometimes they misspelled names, sometimes they forgot. To update a death, sometimes the parchment was reused, and a name was scraped away with a knife. The city forgot people by accident, and sometimes, on purpose, debtors vanished from books after deals were quietly settled. Criminals were unnamed to preserve order. The poor, the sick, the foreign, they were sometimes grouped, unnamed, in a single line, those without standing. But even a system built for forgetting has its cracks. There are margins, smudges, notes scribbled in between lines. He sang outside the guild every Thursday, gave soup to the boy after the flood, returned the borrowed cart, though he did not have to. Tiny kindnesses, quiet memories. The city may have forgotten the names, but not the moments. A broken hinge, a shared loaf, a gesture in the cold, what the city could not forget. Was humanity, it crept in between columns, under seals. Inside the shorthand of tired clerks, and now, dear listener, let us imagine the final page of a ledger. It is late, the ink is nearly dry. A clerk wearing a robe with a stitched cuff and ink on his sleeve closes his register. He does not sigh, he does not stretch. He simply places a weight on the page, so the parchment won't curl. Outside, the bells are ringing the 6th hour of evening. Shadows climb the alley walls. Someone nearby drops a bucket. A child laughs. The smell of fish stew drifts in from a market stall, now closing. The city continues. The page ends, but the rhythm does not. That rhythm, the rhythm of the names, the ink, the silence, the survival leaves on you. Here, now, listening. You have heard it, the footfalls of scribes, the scrape of ink on sheep's skin, the faint cough of a clerk leaning over a cold desk, the muttered complaint written in the margin. You've stepped into a city not of stone, but of records, not of kings, but of clerks, not of statues, but of soup lists. And so, as this segment ends, we do not need a closing argument. We need only this: a name once written, a list once read, a city long gone that still whispers beneath the ink. Imagine the city as it was, not as a tourist sees it today. There is no glass pyramid, no modern Louvre museum. Instead, the Palais du Louvre in the 13th century is a fortified residence, built by King Philip Augustus as both a defensive stronghold and a royal dwelling. Its towers are thick, squat, its walls rise from the western edge of Paris, facing the slow curl of the Seine like a stone sentinel. Inside those walls, silence, order, clean linen, the echo of distant conversation behind heavy wooden doors. The smell is different, here not of soup or ink, but of polished wood, beeswax, crushed herbs, scattered on stone floors, and occasionally the faint powdery scent of imported lavender. The air is cooler, not because of magic, but because the stone is thick, the servants attentive, the fireplaces enormous. Here, the rhythm of life does not depend on book rental schedules or bread queues. It is scripted by ceremony, protocol, and proximity to power. In the palace, no bells toll for common classes. Time is kept differently. A servant knows when to bring water for the queen's hands, not by the sun's position, but by a whispered signal from a chamberlain. Benels arrive with timing dictated by preparation, not by hunger. They are carried in on silver platters draped in cloth, attended by footmen in embroidered tunics. You might hear the clink of polished goblets, the swish of velvet hems across waxed stone. Falcons cry from the training courtyard, the voice of a foreign guest speaking through an interpreter. And yet there is no shouting, no bartering, no cries of fresh turnips or by warm eels. Silence here is not natural, it is enforced. It is curated, it is the sound of privilege. At the court table, dinner is a ritual. Each course is announced, each plate is placed according to rank. The food itself is unlike that of the clerks and scribes. There is meat often spiced beyond recognition. There are imported delicacies, dried figs from the south, cinnamon and ginger from the east, almond milk sauces, thickened and poured over roasted quail. Wine flows freely, but not just any wine. The best vintages are set aside for the king. Lesser lords drink second pressings. Water is flavored with herbs and steeped with rose petals. There is no lentil soup, no broth thickened with stale crusts. Here, hunger is not endured, but anticipated and solved, often before it's felt. And yet, beneath all this, one hears not joy, but caution. Every gesture is watched, every word weighed. To speak out of turn is not rude, it is risky. A mistake in the Latin Quarter might lead to a lost book. A mistake here might lead to a lost post, or worse. A clerk's robe is functional, woolen, perhaps patched at the hem, but in court, clothing becomes code. A nobleman's cloak is lined with fur squirrel or fox, depending on season and budget. A lady's sleeves are so long they nearly drag behind. Her edged in pearl or coloured silk. Even the servants have livery identical colours. Matching cords, a visual announcement of whom they serve. These aren't just garments. They are armour symbols of access, worn as proof that one belongs inside. The walls stop to enter the Louvre as a commoner. Even briefly, one must be summoned, vouched for, and watched, and even then, the moment is fleeting. The door closes behind you. The robe, no matter how borrowed, will never be yours. Imagine for a moment how the nobles sleep, not on straw, but on raised wooden beds with feather mattresses, not wrapped in the same wool they wore by day, but in soft linens warmed by embers or body heat, not beside draughty shutters, but under heavy curtains that hold the heat. Yet they sleep with eyes that have seen assassination, intrigue. Exile.comfort does not equal peace. They are awakened not by rooster or cartwheel, but by a knock 3 times, always the same. They do not leap up, they wait. Listen, respond slowly, carefully, even in sleep. They remain alert because position once gained can be lost. A scribe may be poor forever, but he is never envied. A courtier may be envied forever, but never safe. In the Latin Quarter, students share benches. They crowd together on straw. Mats, they copy from shared books with cracked bindings. They listen to professors who shout, mumble, or quote Aristotle in poor weather. But within the royal household, education is different. It is not public. It is private, personal, a noble. Child learns in a chamber, not a hall. From one tutor, not many. They learn languages, Latin, of course, but also vernacular French, sometimes bits of Italian or Provençal. They learn history not as philosophy, but as lineage, who begat whom, which lord held what, where ancestors fell in battle. They learn manners, when to kneel, when to bow, how to eat without soiling the tablecloth. They do not write on wax tablets. They write on prepared parchment. Their names are practiced in ornate scripts. They trace the family crest before they can write the alphabet. A scribe learns to survive. A court-born child learns how to rule, or to orbit power closely, and still, in both, there are ink-stained fingers, tired eyes, the quiet panic of forgetting a line. But one is corrected gently. The other is dismissed, in the courts of Paris. Justice is not blind, it is divided. If a scholar steals a book in the Latin Quarter, he is brought before a university tribunal cloaked in Latin and caution, judged by men who once borrowed books themselves. If a butcher's apprentice strikes a noble's horse, he may be flogged whether the horse was harmed or not. If a courtier poisons a rival's dog, the matter is quietly settled over wine. The laws are written, but read differently depending on who holds the parchment. The Louvre has its own courts, its own chancellery, its own forgiveness. A tax is waived here, a sentence softened there, not always unfair, but never equal. And so the common folk learn to handle justice like rain dot. Sometimes it falls hard, sometimes it passes, sometimes you're soaked, sometimes it skips your street entirely, but it never asks permission. Now imagine a single man, a law clerk, perhaps the same one we followed in segment 1, who is summoned once to the palace, not as a guest, not as a servant, but as a messenger. A bearer of contracts for royal review, he prepares himself carefully. His robe is brushed, his hair combed with fingers, his shoes wiped against straw. He walks from the Latin Quarter across the Pet Pont, past Notre Dame, following the curve of the Seine toward the great towers of the Louvre Dot at the gates. He is inspected not harshly, but thoroughly. A guard notes the document, nods, and lets him pass through a wooden postern door, not the main gate. The courtyard is silent. The windows gleam. A lady walks a greyhound beside a reflecting pool. The clerk keeps his eyes lowered. Inside. He is led to a chamber with thick tapestries. A steward greets him, asks his name, accepts the scroll. No more is needed. He is dismissed politely, without warmth. He walks back the way he came. He does not belong here, and he knows it. The court is not cruel, but it is distant, and distance is colder than contempt. By the time the clerk returns home, the light is low. The baker's ovens are cooling. The scent of soup rises again from the windows. A cat crosses the alley with slow confidence. He passes a student reciting aloud, a mother hushing a child, a parchment seller closing his stall. He exhales. The palace is gone behind him, but it was never truly part of his Paris. Paris is divided not by walls, but by ways of life. One side wears furs lined with silk, the other men's wool with old thread. One drinks wine, perfumed with herbs. The other boils lentils and onion peels. One sleeps on feathers, the other on straw. Both dream. Both wake. Both in their own rhythm preserve the city, and somewhere in the middle is the same dot, always moving, never choosing sides. A mirror, a divider, a bridge. The bell sounds from Église Saint-Germain-la, letters UXERROIS. It rings not in urgency, but in rhythm. It marks the turning of day to night, the hour when streets dim, shutters close, and candles begin to flicker across windows like small stars born from wax and wicked in the Latin Quarter. The bell is answered by movement. A student rises from the fountain, book under arm. A woman blows out her cooking fire. A scribe rubs his ink-stained knuckles and closes a folio. The day has ended. Not dramatically, but properly. At the Louvre, the sound carries tumult, muffled through stone and tapestry. Here, it means something different. A servant lays out the evening robe. A steward completes the kitchen inventory. The Queen's falconer closes the shutters to the West Tower, but no one rushes. Time bends in different ways here in one Paris. The bell means the final sale of bread for the day. In the other, it marks the second course of dinner. Both hear it, both respond, but they do not hear it. Together, the physical distance between the university's cloisters and the king's chambers is barely a half-hour's walk. One could, if pressed, walk from the poorest tenement in the Latin Quarter to the gates of the Louvre in under 20 minutes, and yet it is the longest short walk in Paris. It spans more than geography. It crosses language, from Latin lectures to courtly French. It crosses sound, from the shouting of fishmongers to the murmured diplomacy of princes. It crosses texture, from rough-spun tunics to ermine-lined mantles. It even crosses light in the Latin Quarter. The streets are lit by torches nailed to beams, sputtering with smoke in the Louvre. Light glows from crystal lamps filled with clear oil. It crosses expectation in the streets. Ambition is modest. To finish copying a book, to afford thicker soup, to mend a winter cloak. In the palace, ambition is dangerous. It rises quickly, it falls more quickly, and yet. There are threads of similarity. Both sides know duty. Both pray, though one in stone chapels, the other in corner shrines. Both love, though one through promise, the other through contract. Both sleep, eventually both. Our human and now, dear listener, we return to the present. You are here, quiet, still breathing softly, but in your mind, perhaps you still walk the streets of medieval Paris. You pass a candlelit bookstall, a soup pot steaming on a corner, a child sleeping beside a parchment roll. You see a lady pass beneath a stone arch, her steps slow, her cloak pulled close. You hear bells, and you remember ... that history does not belong to the grand alone. The past is not only kings and courts, it is also a clerk writing by the last light of day, a widow petitioning for clean drains, a scribe correcting a smudged line. With tired grace, a noble girl tracing her family's crest with chilled fingers, a boy watching a falcon rise from the towers near the Louvre, never once believing he could enter. We carry all of them in memory, in rhythm, in silence. And as your eyes begin to close, as the candle dims in your thoughts, let this story fade gently, let the soup cool on the hearth, let the books be shelved, let the names in the register rest, undisturbed, and let Paris drift back into shadows, soft dim enduring.